In this episode of Biblical Unlocks, we will go through a chapter of the Bible and make it make sense in your life today. Studies routinely show that reading your Bible regularly significantly lowers symptoms of depression, anxiety, and anger, whilst also increasing forgiveness, compassion, and a sense of purpose. So if you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of Biblical Unlocks. Today, we're going to be reading Genesis 45. I'm going to read it in full, and then afterwards we're going to go through some deep biblical unlocks. Just a recap of what happened previously. In Genesis 45, we're going to finally get the reveal. That is, Joseph is going to finally tell his brothers who he is, right? Because obviously Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers. Then his brothers abandoned him. He became really successful in the land of Egypt, where he was sold into slavery. And then there was a famine elsewhere in the land of Canaan, where his brothers were living. So they had to come to Egypt. And Joseph basically hid the fact that they were that he was secretly their brother. And now it's all going to be revealed in this particular chapter. So I'm going to read it in full, and we're going to go through the deep biblical unlocks afterwards. So then Joseph could no longer control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Send everyone away from me." So no one stayed with him. When Joseph made himself known to his brothers, and he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it, Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him, so dismayed were they at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." And they came closer. He said, "I am your brother, Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children, as well as your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have will not come to poverty. And now your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my own mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father how greatly I am honored in Egypt, and all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here." Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, while Benjamin wept upon his neck. He kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after that his brothers talked with him. When the report was heard in Pharaoh's house, "Joseph's brothers have come," Pharaoh and his servants were pleased. Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Say to your brothers, 'Do this, load your animals and go back to the land of Canaan. Take your father and your households and come to me, so that I may give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you may enjoy the fat of the land.' You are further charged to say, 'Do this, take wagons from the land of Egypt for your little ones and for your wives, and bring your father and come. Give no thought to your possessions, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours.'" The sons of Israel did so. Joseph gave them wagons according to the instruction of Pharaoh, and he gave them provisions for the journey. To each one of them he gave a set of garments, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 sets of garments. To his father he sent the following: 10 donkeys loaded with the good things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and provision for his father on the journey. Then he sent his brothers away on their way, and as they were leaving he said to them, "Do not quarrel along the way. So they went up out of Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. And they told him, Joseph is still alive. He is even ruler over all the land of Egypt. He was stunned. He could not believe them. But when they told him all the words of Joseph that he had said to him, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. Israel said, Enough, my son Joseph is alive. I must go and see him before I die. Okay, let's go through some deep biblical unlocks. First and foremost, in verses 1 to 8, Joseph reveals himself. He can't contain himself anymore. He says, I am Joseph. And he immediately redirects this moment to explain something theological, and that is the idea of forgiveness. What does he say? He says, God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. And notice what he says. He says, so it was not you who sent me here, but God. So Joseph refuses to say that it was because of you. You are the one to blame. You did all of these things. Because it is true, right? They were the one who sold him into slavery. Imagine you are in slavery, right? Your brothers, these are your kindred. These are people you break bread with. And they betray you in this way. They sell you into slavery. You're all alone. It's so easy to say, you know what? You caused me all of this pain and strife. What did Joseph do? Joseph did nothing. But then all of a sudden he says, it was not you who sent me here, but God. What kind of person would say something like this? Being sold into slavery, all alone, no one to help you. He trusts in God. That's the reason. And the thing is, God doesn't work with wavering hearts. God needs you to trust completely in Him. And what that means is to let go. Stop trying to take things into your own hands. Now, it's easier said than done. What does that even mean? It means when you feel as though you've been betrayed, when you feel like everything is going down, when you feel that you are a failure, what you need to say is, God is the hidden author who uses even evil to accomplish life-saving good. So, and we're going to read this in Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good. And that is what is important to recognize. Then in verses 9 to 20, Joseph hugs, he kisses, he weeps, he tells all of them not to be angry with themselves. Don't be angry with yourselves. And this scene is actually really emotionally raw because the brothers are actually terrified and ashamed. But Joseph's forgiveness, right, it's not sentimental. He recognizes the pain, but he names God's sovereignty over it all. He says, God is in control here. I didn't have to worry, and I don't want you to worry because I know that even though you intended it for evil, God intended it for good. And it's actually crazy because the way that Joseph reconciles himself with his brothers is immense. He forgives them. Why? Because he doesn't blame them, because he recognizes something that Paul recognizes later in the New Testament. Paul writes saying, so now no longer is it I who sin, but sin that dwelleth within me. So what Joseph recognizes with his brothers is that it is not them who sin, but it's not them who does evil. It is not they who is evil. It's not they who want to do it, right? Because in Romans chapter 7 verse 16, when Paul is writing, he says, if I do what I do not want to do, I admit that the law is good. In that case, it is no longer I who do it, but it is sin living in me that does it. I know that nothing good lives in me, that is in my flesh, for I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. How real is that Bible verse, right? Because you don't want to do the bad things there, but your flesh, your flesh is flesh, right? It just does whatever it does according to its own feelings, desires, emotions. And Joseph recognizes this, and he recognizes that God is the ultimate arbitrator over all of our faults, right? So he is the one who can honor the truth, he can honor and allow for forgiveness to repair relationships. But what he does is, he allows and tolerates evil to bring about his greater purposes. So, this forgiveness honors the truth. He doesn't say that, he doesn't completely negate that they did something evil. He recognizes evil, but forgives because Joseph reframes it with God in the center. In verses 21 to 28, what do we see? Joseph issues some orders, right? Fills their sacks with provisions, sends wagons to bring Jacob, his father, back, and Pharaoh even says he'll give them the best of all of Egypt. And the forgiveness here is actually made tangible. It's made physical, right? Hospitality and resources to restore what was broken. And the brothers are actually overwhelmed because Joseph's generosity removes the practical sting of their past wrong. What that means is, imagine this level of generosity. It completely and utterly demonstrates that he is forgotten. He named his son Manasseh, right? It means forgotten. He has completely and utterly forgotten the past actions that they have done. And he's reconciling in a way which is so generous. And in doing so, Joseph shows that he has no wrong. There's no wrongdoing that he has done here. Yet the guilt is on the brothers. And by doing so, the forgiveness is complete. We can see something similar. I don't know if you may have caught this, but Jesus talks about this. So obviously Jesus comes a little bit later in the New Testament, right? And we see that forgiveness often manifests in actual, tangible reconciliation and provision, giving others to wipe your debts clean. So for example, in Luke chapter 7, verse 41 to 43, Jesus says, "A certain moneylender had 2 debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50 denarii. When they could not pay, he cancelled debts for both of them. Now which of them will love him more?" Simon answered, "I suppose the one for whom he cancelled the greater debt." And Jesus said to him, "You have judged rightly." So he uses this metaphor to describe how when you're cancelling a debt, the more debt that you cancel corresponds to a greater level of appreciation for the cancelling of the debt. But what that relates to is the fact that if you have a lot of sin, and then you go and Jesus says, "I'll wipe your sins away," you have more grateful. But then if you think to yourself, "Oh, I'm a good person, I don't have that many sins," and then you get it forgiven, you're not as grateful because you feel like you're a good person. You could get to heaven on your own. It's just that you need a little bit of cleaning. I think one of the most important things as Christians that we need to recognize is that we are evil. We are truly evil, unbelievably evil, evil beyond all measure. And when you realize that, and you realize where you were going, if it wasn't for Jesus Christ's sacrifice on the cross, then you will start to become grateful for the free gift of salvation that you have received. But it becomes very easy to be complacent, say, "You know what, I don't really need it. I could have gotten to heaven on my own, you know." Final 5 verses of the chapter, Jacob returns. The brothers return to Jacob, and they say Joseph is actually still alive. He's actually the ruler of all of Egypt. Do you know that son that you were so distraught over losing? He's actually still alive. And Jacob refused to believe at first, and then is shaken to life. "My son is still alive, and I will go see him before I die." So his grief turns to hope because of the reappearance of his one and only youngest son. Isn't that remarkable? The reappearance of his one and only son, well, not one and only, of his son, his youngest son, the youngest son that he thought that he lost, turns his grief to hope. Exactly the same way that Jesus Christ, when he died, God's one and only son, lost. And when he comes back, grief is turned to hope. And the family's exile is now reframed as a natural step in survival and covenant continuation. So, whilst there are aching memories, right, in a way, right, because God heals through these aching memories. Joseph could have put these brothers to death. Imagine if Joseph just said to Pharaoh, "Yeah, these guys, you know what, they sold me into slavery, they made me pay, they did so much horrible things to me, they put me in a pit, and I was lost, and I was all alone, and then I was sent to jail because of Potiphar's wife, who wrongly accused me of sexual immorality. So all of these things, an awful situation. And this is not, imagine, Joseph only became the ruler of Egypt when he was after 30 years old. So for the first 30 years of his life, he spent his time in slavery, in prison. Think about it. Many of you are younger than 30, and some of you are older than 30. Imagine 30 years of your life, right? You're spent in prison, in slavery, and abandoned by your brothers. This is what would you be thinking in your head all of those 30 years? And think about it. If you go for a week thinking negatively about someone, that changes you. Imagine 30 years, but he survives, he goes through it because he trusts in God over his own thoughts. And that's something that he needs to that's something we all need to recognize. Okay, so Joseph's forgiveness is unique. Remember, he didn't deny what his brothers did. He names it. He lets them feel the weight. He lets them feel their conviction, but then he reads it through God's providence. God intended this. It was not you who sent me here, but God. Okay? This is not a it's not a get out of jail free card, right, for the brothers. But what it shows is, whilst there is human responsibility for your actions, right, God can use evil for ultimate blessing. Holding both, right, both the fact that God can use evil for human flourishing or ultimate blessing, and to preserve human responsibility, it actually shows a very important theological implication, that we have free will, but God can bring about his greater purposes through our inactions and our poor actions, if you will. And yeah, so Joseph actually continues to be a Christ-like figure, right? The betrayed one who forgives, provides abundantly, invites the family into a foreign land where they will be preserved and become a conduit of blessing to all of the nations. So it's again this idea of national salvation and identity, and it's important. But something that is important for you is, do you think Joseph was freed? 100%. He was freed because he forgave. Forgiveness is for you, not for the other person. So that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help you keep up your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. I upload daily, so if you don't want to miss tomorrow's episode, feel free to rate the show and follow. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And always remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.